proved by an act that there is no room for sanity or reasoning about consequences. So in that moment where the act is being committed, the consequences are not being considered. So if you take that into account, and this is the small number of individuals that are actually committing the acts, and that's who we're trying to deter, it's not effective in that sense. And so it's a hard thing to wrap your mind around, I guess. It took me a long time to say, because I always thought that, it would stop me from killing. I wouldn't kill. I mean, there's other things that stop us from killing, of course, but if I was driven to the point where, my morality went out the window, I think, the death penalty would probably stop me from killing. But the truth is, I don't know. I really don't know. I've never been driven to that point where I go off. And this is what happens. I think in most cases, crimes of passion, revenge, where people just lose their sense of morality or humanity, whatever happens. And the deterrent factor is no longer applies in that situation. I'm sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. I don't know if we can do this, but back to about the countries that have abolished the death penalty. 1/3 of the countries in law, so they've erased it from their books. They've been through the debates and the arguments in the government, and they've come to the conclusion that the death penalty, that the system is not working, it's not effective, and we do not want it. It does not reflect the values of our society anymore. But there are other countries around the world, of the 2/3 that are remaining, some of them have not executed in maybe 4 or 5 years, and some of them have places like a de facto. It's not written in, but it's just they have decided to abstain from execution, even if there are inmates on death row awaiting execution, because they're unsure about whether they should proceed with an execution or not. And one of the mitigating factors in this confusion that governments have is that that the majority, and even in countries where they've abolished the death penalty, the majority are still for it. When they poll the people still say, yes, we want it. So you can imagine that a politician who wants to get reelected is deciding, do I go against the people and, against my better judgment and go ahead and execute, or do I side with the people and give them what they want? And so this is kind of the confusion within a lot of governments. So they're staying executions like they come up, and they're always pushed to a date, especially in the United States. In some of the states that have stopped executing. The execution dates are given, but then the governor will step in and stop it. And it's because usually one individual, either the governor or the justice minister, there's always one person in every state that is responsible for the final signature that goes on the death warrant for an execution. And this, in Taiwan, they had a 4-year, little over 4-year moratorium on executions, and it was broken in April this year. They executed 4 people. There was a period when Abian, the former president, he had on his, as part of the election campaign, said that I will erase the death penalty for all crimes during my term. It was his absolute pledge to the people of Taiwan. Now, during his term, he did not make any amendments to any laws pertaining to the death penalty. But while he was in office, the justice minister, who personally objected to it, and she actually said when she was elected, I personally oppose the death penalty, she would not sign any death warrants. Now, eventually, she was forced to resign, and another justice minister was put into place, and of course, he had no qualms about signing. Maybe he did, but anyways, he signed 4 death warrants, and the moratorium ended. And so this is the age of from the age of enlightenment. I think it made me think about that. From the age of enlightenment, now it's a long period for us to be enlightened, but we're still in the middle of such confusion about this issue. And there are some of the philosophical arguments that you're talking about, Ron. I think today the arguments are more practical. There's some really sound practical arguments against the death penalty. For one, because of the length of time that the death penalty has been documented since the age of enlightenment, we have some real documentation about the numbers, like the crime rate, where countries have abolished the death penalty. How has the crime rate responded as a result of it? Is it true that, you know, if you stop executing, does the crime rate go up? And for sure, there was no evidence that the crime rate has gone up. In Canada, since 1976, the crime rate has fallen 44% since abolishing the death penalty. In the United States, in 2004, they did a study of all the states that executed versus the states that did not execute. And in the states that executed, overall, their crime rate was 1% lower than the states that executed. Now, I really have, in the beginning of the time that I spent trying to understand the death penalty and the justice system, I clung to facts and figures because there's so much out there. Like there's, on either side of the argument, there's stacks upon stacks of statistics and arguments that are based on fact, and a lot of it just started to confuse me. It was like making my head spin, because I just thought, with all this hard evidence, how come there's no conclusion? There must be something missing from this equation. And one of the things that I thought about, especially when I started to think about giving the speech, was there's a real distinction to be made in my mind between the death penalty and the system of the death penalty. Because the death penalty is just about death. It's about the actual act of executing an individual. It's very simply put. Someone gets convicted of a capital offense that warrants the death penalty, they're sentenced to death. They go through the appeal process, and they're executed. The death penalty system is, I think, more in the political arena, and it's the debate over it. And it's debate within the government, it's the debate amongst the people, it's the philosophy, it's the thinking behind. Do we as a country, as a society, value, do our values reflect or warrant such an act? And one of the things that struck me about in Taiwan, after the 4 executions, the European Union condemned, they sent messages to Taiwan saying we condemn this act, and we strongly urge you to not execute in the future and to rethink your position on the death penalty. And the Justice Minister was only response was that the people still defend it, and that if and when the people stop demanding it, then we will rethink the whole issue. And it made me think of 2 things. It made me think, one, that a government that puts an issue to the people and doesn't educate them on the issue, is severely problematic. And the second thing it made me think about is that, this is democracy in action. This is what this Justice Minister is saying, is that we reflect the views of the people. And the people in that case, which are the people of Taiwan and us that are living here as well, we do have some power here. If it's true, what he's saying is that if the views of the people are directly impacting legislation, like it is, and in most cases it does not. Legislation happens without the consultation of the majority. But in this case, because I think governments, they really have a hard time defending their position to execute to the rest of the world. So, they dig deep to find reasons to justify what they're doing. And in this case, they said it's the people of Taiwan. It's they want it. And it made me think, wow, this is the case where the people, if educated really about this issue, could come to a conclusion that it ends the death penalty. In most countries that have abolished, it has not been as a result of a majority decision. The people have not been a part of the legislation. They've done it outside of the